Hi, welcome to the Catholic Corner. I'm Monsignor Walter Nolan. My guest today is a beautiful, beautiful woman of faith and love and family. And she has a great story to tell us. Usha Rosie DeVito. Usha was raised in Trinidad, born in Trinidad, and has been with us now for a few years. She also was a member of the Hindu faith when she was younger. Usha was a single mom of two great children, Megan and Michael. And she moved to the United States at the age of 26. But as you know, God's story never just simply stops. It goes on and on and on. So when Usha was here, that was 24 years ago. Since that time, she met and fell in love with a beautiful man, her husband, Mark. And Usha, Michael, and Megan became members of our Catholic faith. Usha and her husband, Mark, also have a child, Matthew. And they're raising Matthew, also Catholic, to be one with the family of God. All three of her children attended Catholic elementary school. Usha is not only a beautiful, devout Catholic, but she works full-time for our Catholic Church as the director of the New Jersey Network of Catholic School Families for our Diocese of Trenton and Camden. Usha also continues her studies and her spiritual development because she is engaged in our own diocese lay ecclesial ministry program. As you know, it's called ILAM. Usha will share with us a journey of faith to the Catholic Church and a journey to be a full-time member and advocate for the public policies on behalf of our Catholic schools. Boy, oh boy, Usha, that was a nice introduction.
Thank you, Monsignor.
God, you got so much of your story. Where do we begin? You know, thanks first of all for being on our Catholic Corner. Tell me though a little bit, maybe your journey to the United States and whole new life in a way, or maybe begin back in Trinidad and tell me a little bit how it all was and how you developed in your love of God.
Well, first of all, my journey to America to live with my children is probably the biggest leap of faith that I ever took. I knew exactly what I wanted for my kids. Everyone, if you know the people who live in the islands, they all look at America as the land of gold and opportunities. So I thought this would be a good chance for me to bring my kids here and give them the best education they possibly could have. So I knew what I wanted. I knew where I was going, but I wasn't sure how it was going to pan out. Suddenly, I knew I was going to somehow make the goal materialize for myself. As far as my faith journey, I would have to credit much of that to my father. My father has been and still is a very devout Hindu. Much of what I've learned about faith and ministry and service, I learned from my dad. I remember as an old child growing up, my dad would wake up every morning before the sunrise, and this is part of the Hindu faith, where a devout Hindu would wake up in the morning and do a ritual to the sun with water. And it would be at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and my dad used to have this big bunch of keys that he would open the front door with, and I would hear the bunch of keys jiggle, you know, and I would wake up and just run out there with my dad. And he had in the Hindu tradition, the jar that you would use to do your rituals is called a kalsa, and my dad would have this tiny little one for me, for my little hands, and we would go outside to our area where we would say our prayers, and it's called a jandi. And he would offer the prayers to the sun with the water, and he would have me do the same. So, and of course, 6 o'clock every evening is a very special time for a Hindu also, where we light the holy light in the house, and it stays lit until you go to bed at night. And this is something I always got involved with my dad. So my dad is certainly the catalyst for my faith journey.
So your dad certainly had a very spiritual part of his life and dedicated his life always every day to
Yes.
to the God and the light of salvation, and what a beautiful, beautiful gift. Was it hard to come to the United States, Usha? I mean, did you have a job when you got here, or before you came here, or did you just leave it up to your dad's prayer and your own faith?
Well, I did. I did work. I worked for the state, or what you would call the Trinidad government, back home as an auditor. And when I decided to leave, it was not a difficult decision to make, because I was a single mother, as you know, and with my two young children, I knew what I wanted for the kids. And when you have kids and you want to build family, you want the best for them, it's not a difficult decision to make, to do whatever it takes to make that happen.
But you had a position here to come to?
I did not.
Oh,
I did
so that's a
not.
big leap of faith.
I did not. Actually, when I first came here, my first job was as a babysitter. I worked for a family, two doctors, both pediatricians, and they had two children, which would also play into part of my journey. The two children had a terminal disease, and eventually the little boy passed away, and then subsequent to that, the little girl did also, which is where I met my husband, Mark. As an RN, he worked taking care of one of the children, and I was watching the other little girl, and this is where we met. Because the little girl would always run into the room to see her brother, and this is how we started talking. So,
You know, there's an old expression by one of the saints and said that every story is a story of God.
that's right.
And certainly your story is just unfolding as a beautiful story of God. So you've come here, and now tell me about your journey to the Catholic faith, or you met Mark and fell in love and
Got married, and we had our youngest son, Matthew. Michael and Megan, they were brought up in the Hindu faith, the same as I was, and I wanted the same type of structure of education for the kids as I had in Trinidad. So hence we sent them to Catholic school, St. Mary Byzantine, which is now closed in Trenton. When they graduated from there, the school closed the next year, so therefore Matthew just had 1 year by himself in kindergarten, and then we moved him to Holy Cross in Trenton, which eventually closed also. However, Matthew started there, and one of the things that the principal said to me was, you know, when I registered Matthew, she said, "Are you registering as a parishioner or a non-parishioner?" And I said to her, "Well, what's the difference? I don't know." And she says, "Well, if you're a parishioner, it's X amount of dollars, and if you're not a parishioner, it's X amount more." I said, "Well, how about parishioner?" So she said, "Well, are you registered?" I said, "Well, no." She says, "Okay, well, you go over to the rectory and you speak to the Monsignor and you let him know you want to be a parishioner."
This was Monsignor Arniston?
Monsignor
Just a
Arniston,
wonderful
yes.
man, wonderful man.
Yes. So this is how we, through the fault of a financial issue, we became parishioners of Holy Cross. And of course, I haven't looked back since.
And then you entered a process of learning, or did you go through the RCIA process
I
or
did.
something like that?
I did. I went through the RCA process.
And the
with
children
Deacon.
also?
The children
So
also.
you went as a family?
We did. Well, it was separate. We took our separate journeys towards the same goal. I went by myself through the RCIA process with Deacon Grussler, John Grussler.
Oh, yes. I
And
knew John from Notre Dame High School.
Yes, and he's still there. And the next year, my oldest son, Michael, who was at the Citadel at the time, he started the RCIA process down there.
At the Citadel?
At the Citadel, and came back to Holy Cross to receive all his sacraments, which left my youngest, my daughter actually, they left her as the last Mohican, as Monsignor Ted Wojciechowski would call her all the time. He said, "You're the last Mohican, you know, you have to come to the church too." And she said, "Well, you know, I'll take my time. And Mom, it took you 42 years, you know, give me a chance, I'll get there." But eventually she started RCA at her college, Bard College in upstate New York, and came back to Holy Cross to receive all her sacraments. So over the span of about 3 years, you know, we were eventually brought into the Catholic Church.
Oh, that's marvelous how God touched all you in a little
Yes,
different way.
absolutely.
And you all came to the same journey. What were some of the signs along the way? I mean, you know, the expression that you had with Dad praying as a child. I mean, certainly our Catholic faith, we have our prayers and our prayers around the Eucharist. Was there things that connected for you easily, or were there some struggles about the way you learned the spiritual life as a Hindu and the way you learned them as a Christian Catholic?
I never felt a struggle at all. Being with my dad, it was really very free-flowing. And of course, at that time, when I would engage in so many Hindu spiritual events, I never thought for a moment that I would become a Catholic someday. But it's when I decided to go to high school and I got a scholarship to go to an Anglican high school that I became exposed to Christianity. And one day a visiting Franciscan monk, Franciscan friar from England came to give a talk, and I was very interested in what he was going to say. You know, I thought, this guy in this brown robe, you know, he looks really interesting. I want to hear what he has to say. And he started to speak to the class, and eventually we ended up writing to each other and communicating by letters all the time. And one day he sent me a picture in my envelope of the Sacred Heart of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And I was taken back by that because I had never seen anything like that. Even though I was in Anglican school, the Sacred Heart of Jesus was not part of, you know, what they did. So I took the picture, and I remember having it in my room, but I would always hide it behind my mirror so that nobody in my family would see it, because I didn't know what he would think, you know, who is this, you know, what is that, you know? So eventually, I would have to say that's the start of it. That's how my first experience with Christianity came about, through Brother Sebastian, who, if he's still around, I would love to meet him.
Oh, well, you ought to try to find. How old would Brother be now?
Well, I was 13 years old at the time when I first met him, and he would have been probably somewhere in his late 20s.
Oh, you know, there's a very, very, very good chance. You could, was he from England?
Yes, yes.
See, there is a great big book that you can kind of look up all these names.
Possibly,
Oh,
I
yeah,
hope.
you ought to do that. He'd be thrilled. Oh, to get a letter from you, he'd be absolutely thrilled.
Yes, yes.
So and what about the Catholic faith that was was it the Sacred Heart that attracted you, or the Mass, or the Eucharist? What was it so much that you felt so, you know, drawn towards?
Well, you have to remember, I only had my encounter with this picture of the Sacred Heart when I was 13.
Mm.
And by the time I was out of high school and started college, I had sort of forgotten about it. You know, it kind of fell to the wayside. But when I came to America and I started sending my kids to Catholic school, that was my first exposure to really being in the middle of the rituals and the Catholic faith and so forth. And again, I'm focusing so much on raising my two kids that was just another thing that was on the outside. It was just the thing that they did. I wanted the environment for the kids, and that's where I sent them. And you know, it just worked out that way that I was comfortable with that decision. As far as my own faith life, it didn't play into it at all, into that, any decisions. But it was when Mark and I got married, and I went to the first Mass at Holy Cross. I remember it was a Christmas, and there were poinsettias everywhere. And I thought, my gosh, I have not seen so many poinsettias since I left Trinidad, because that's what we have there. They grow wild all over. And I remember sitting there and just admiring the architecture of the church. If you've been to Holy Cross Church, you know it's a very special place to be. And we were sitting waiting for Mass to begin, and I heard the bells ring, and then a string of priests come out, and all, you know, their vestments so fully adorned, and go up to the altar, the incense and all of that. And I was really taken aback by all of that. And if you know anything about Hindu faith, you'd know that a lot of these things are similar. Mm-hmm. I saw a lot of similarities with the vestments, with the colors, you know, the festivity of the whole Mass. It was not unlike anything that I had been involved with before. That was really my first attraction, the visual, all the sensories.